I can't bear to watch popular movies about Winston Churchill, except 2 now. And I can't bear to read much about him because it's so bad. So I want you to know, I think that this is a very significant thing. And I think that the combination of these 2 men, I don't think anybody except Mr. Ullman could have done this. So I just want to say that I'll shut up now, but I think this is one of the best things done in art in decades.
Thank you so much.
How did you get ready to do this film?
How did I get ready? I just did, it was a year of Churchill, everything Churchill. Actually to the point where Giselle would say, she said, I go to bed with Winston Churchill, but I wake up with Gary Oldman. which is better than the other way round, I guess.
I think...
She was a Star Wars and watched every frame of footage, and I read the books I read, and we would. So it was actually a real journey. And she would find these things. My nickname for Giselle is the finder of rare things, and she would find she was a marvelous companion on this journey. And the more I read your book you kindly sent me, the more I read about Churchill, the more I watched Churchill, the more I listened to him, the more I just fell in love with him.
And along the way, in that part of the process, you're very privileged. You're in the movie business. Gary Oldman is going to play Winston Churchill. Suddenly, you get to go to the war rooms after hours with no tourists. You get to go to Blenheim before hours, which is early, before no tourists. You get to go to the war rooms, and they open up the special doors, and they take away the velvet ropes. And Giselle and I got to be in those rooms, and Gary was able to be in those rooms, sit on Churchill's bed, sit in the chair.
Yeah, in the war room, there is the chair that the great man occupied, and on the arm of the left arm of the chair are these sort of divots and deep scratches which he had made with his fingernails, and on the right hand arm of the chair are the scratches which he made from the tapping of his ring. And for an actor, there's a point where you can read the books and you can study the man, but there is a point when you have to sort of put that away, and it becomes less about an intellectual exercise and more about a sensation or a feeling that you have to have. And it was a real privilege and a wonderful revelation to sit in the chair, because there now, in this piece of furniture, is behavior, is the anxiety and the stress and all of that he was under, and you can trace it with your hand and actually touch
noticing
history.
That. So people play Churchill this way. Churchill is a caricature of himself, and he talks like this, and he growls all the time, and he walks really slow. Churchill was lightning quick, mentally and physically. He was a fencer in college. He played polo until he's well into his 50s. And so to meet him was to meet a man who was electric. And Doug and I were sitting back there watching the movie last night, and they zoomed in on the hand, and it was going like that. And I said, that's right. He burned really hot all the time. You see? And you got that. Nobody else has ever got that.
Well, it's in the newsreel footage of this time, of this very specific window of time, and a very defining moment in not only in world history but in Churchill's career. Going to this very specific moment, I noticed a man who was energized, on fire, dynamic, moving through space with a fixity of purpose, a man on a mission, cherubic, naughty, a sparkle in his eye, and this was not the sort of curmudgeon, grumpy man shuffling around in his monogrammed slippers, dropping, scar ash on his waistcoat. This was a man who was a leader, leading us.
Well, you said that one of the things, we didn't mention this earlier, you didn't mention it, but you said at some point that one of the things that convinced you to play Churchill was simply being able to speak those lines. And how often do you get to speak once more into the breach, dear friends, in a major motion picture? You don't these days.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't all, I would have 3 days of working on this role, and then I would go wobbly, and I'd say to Doug or Giselle, oh God, what have I let myself in for? I can't do it. I won't be, this is awful. I won't be any good. And really it was Douglas and Giselle, separately, but who said to me, what's the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing that could happen is you could be really awful. But in the process, you got to stand in a room with 600 people and say, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears and sweat. I get to stand in a room and say, we shall fight in France, we shall fight on the seas and oceans.
So describe your work day with all that makeup. What was that like?
Okay, so we at the very beginning of the shoot. So my early days, my alarm clock would go off at like 1:30, 1:45. 2:15, we would be in the car, and I would get to the set at like 2:45. My first pickup on day one was at 1:45. So I had to be in the car at 1:45. I'd get to the set, they would shave my head, which...
every day.
After day 36 was, that was how my morning started. They would shave my head, and then of course you have glue. They paint you with your neck, and then the process.
Is that glue nice and warm?
No, the glue isn't warm. No. Giselle was there, make me some coffee and a protein drink or something, and then it would be 3 hours 15 of the makeup, and then another 45 minutes to get into the suit and the clothes and things. But there was an added advantage to this job that we couldn't foresee when we started. I was dressed and ready as Churchill when the director arrived and the other actors for rehearsal. They never saw me as Gary for 3 months. They only met me as Winston. I was in dressing room number 1, and you turn left to go into the studio, or you walk the corridor to go through the other studio door, depending which set or side you were on in the mornings. And the background artists and extras and various people who were secretaries in the typing pool, the various soldiers that were there in the war room, they would line the corridor waiting to go onto the set. And I would emerge from the dressing room and walk down the corridor, and I would emerge, obviously made up completely as Churchill. And the reaction that was there, some of the women curtsied. the men would come to attention and stand back and salute, and it was a very strange. It was because you forget that you're wearing all of this. That's the thing. So that people are reacting to you as Winston Churchill, and that was it was a lot of fun. It was great to be PM for a while.
I want to add something. You visited us on the set. When you see Gary's, and Gary is a stickler for detail, as is our costumer, Jacqueline Duran, when you see Gary in Winston's suits, those suits are made by Winston's tailors. When you see those shoes, they're made by Winston's shoemakers. Those are Winston's cigars. I think the watch was not the actual watch, but the type of watch. Every detail, the bow tie, the hat was made by Winston's hat maker. There was not a thing that you were seeing in the Winston of it that wasn't absolutely researched and to the tiniest detail and
silk
authentic.
underwear.
What's that?
Silk underwear.
Silk underwear, that's right.
How's that?
It's lovely.
Churchill certainly liked it.
As he said, I could easily get used to the
You get
best.
used to this. Yeah. How'd you smoke all those cigars?
Oh, dear.
With great difficulty. Yeah, I went through, I don't know if I'm proud to say this or ashamed of it, $30,000 worth of cigars.
Yeah.
Because again, you know, he could easily get used to the best. And they were about $50 a pop. And I got through about 12 a day, I think. And I subsequently got nicotine poisoning. And then I had a very, very bad tummy. And it was so, we had our Christmas break, and people went off to celebrate with their families and decorate their trees and buy their presents and, you know, put up the holly and the mistletoe, and I had a colonoscopy.
Now about mean actors, I'll say this. We had dinner the night before. Penny and I and two of our children went and watched them make this movie. And you can't have got to bed that night before 10:30 or 11. And then you're up at 1:30 or 2, whatever it is. And you go till 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock. So we watched you all day long that day. And you were cheerful and courteous to everybody you saw, and who saw you, including us, all day long. Yeah. So you could see why actors would be mean. It's harder to see why you're not.
Well, it's like, I mean, I'm telling you, you know, God, I had to work a long day, you know, and that sound you can hear is the smallest violin playing. You know, I figured if Winston Churchill could take on Adolf Hitler at 65, I can sit in a makeup chair for 3.5 hours. You know, life could be a lot worse, couldn't it? You know?
So to me, and I'll say the college, to be a little part of this and have you here in this worthy thing, we are very proud and we thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.